She was the sharp-tongued Miss Jane Hathaway on the Beverly Hillbillies. He was the no-holds-barred star of Sanford and Son. Did you grow up watching these two icons? Comment 1 if you remember Sanford and Son, or 0 if the Beverly Hillbillies was your favorite. Nancy Kulp and Redd Foxx, two legends of classic TV from two very different worlds. But what if we told you? Their paths crossed in a way no one ever expected. After decades of silence, Redd Foxx once opened up about Nancy Kulp, and what he said left everyone stunned. Let's uncover a surprising truth that even longtime fans never saw coming. The Unfiltered Truth. Before he was Redd Foxx, the gravel-voiced, sharp-tongued king of uncensored comedy, he was John Elroy Sanford, born on December 9, 1922 in St. Louis, Missouri. The son of a Pullman porter and a fiercely independent mother, young John grew up in a world stacked against him. His childhood was shaped not by ease or opportunity, but by the bruising realities of poverty, racism, and the rough edges of life on the south side of Chicago where his family moved when he was a child. In those narrow streets and crowded tenements, he learned early how to survive, how to observe, and most importantly, how to laugh. That laughter wasn't the soft, polite chuckle of cocktail parties. It was raw necessary, and often dark, born from pain defiance and the sheer will to get through another day. It was the laughter of people who had been pushed down, but refused to stay down. And Redd Foxx, even before he knew, it was already listening. He dropped out of school in the 10th grade and hit the road, young, hungry, and unafraid. In the 1940s, when stages for black performers were few and far between, Foxx found his calling on the Chitlin circuit, a network of clubs, bars, and theaters where black entertainers could perform far from the segregated glamour of Hollywood and white-owned nightclubs. There, in smoky back rooms and half-lit lounges, he built something electric. His comedy was unlike anything America had heard before, unfiltered, explicit, and blisteringly honest. He talked about sex. He talked about racism. He talked about the hypocrisy of the church and the absurdity of white society's rules. He said what others wouldn't say, sometimes what others couldn't even admit to themselves, and audiences couldn't get enough. By the 1950s and 1960s, Foxx had become known as the king of the party records. He recorded over 50 comedy albums, many with titles as bold and irreverent as the man himself. You Gotta Wash Your Ass, I Ain't Lied Yet, and Laugh of the Party. These albums, often sold under the counter or passed between friends, were too risque for radio, too real for television, and far too ahead of their time for polite society. But they weren't made for the gatekeepers. They were made for the people. These recordings were trailblazing, and the people made Redd Foxx a star. They helped break down racial barriers in the entertainment industry and pave the way for future comedians like Richard Pryor, Eddie Murphy, and Chris Rock. Redd Foxx wasn't just telling jokes. He was redefining comedy for a new generation. While white America was still clutching its pearls over I Love Lucy and the Andy Griffith Show, Foxx was building a different legacy, truth-telling through humor. He was doing stand-up with the raw urgency of protest and the sharp intelligence of jazz. He made people laugh, yes, but also flinch, reflect, and often rethink what they believed about race, sex power, and the absurdity of American life. Foxx wasn't just a comedian. He was a revolutionary dressed in a cheap suit, armed with a microphone and a cackle that could shatter windows. And yet, for years he remained underground, celebrated by working-class black audiences and whispered about in white circles. But that changed in 1972, the rise of Redd Foxx. In a bold move that would redefine television history, NBC cast Redd Foxx as the star of its American adaptation of the British sitcom Steptoe and Son. The result was Sanford and Son, a sharp, character-driven comedy about a cranky junk dealer and his long-suffering son living and hustling in the heart of Watts, Los Angeles. Foxx played Fred G. Sanford, and from the very first episode he owned the role with such effortless brilliance that it felt less like acting and more like living. Fred Sanford was brash, stubborn, hilarious, and full of contradictions. He insulted everyone with equal glee, claimed every minor inconvenience was a heart attack. Elizabeth, I'm coming to join you, honey, and constantly squabbling with his son Lamont, played by Damond Wilson, in a dynamic that was equal parts hilarious and heartfelt. But Sanford and Son wasn't just funny, it was historic. At a time when primetime television largely ignored black life or reduced it to caricature, Sanford and Son stood out. It centered a working-class black family, portrayed them with depth and complexity, and didn't shy away from issues of poverty, racism, or generational conflict. It was gritty and real, but always laced with humor, giving audiences black and white a glimpse into a world they rarely saw on screen. The show quickly became a ratings juggernaut, often ranking in the top 10 and attracting millions of viewers each week. Redd Foxx went from cult icon to mainstream star, his name and face instantly recognizable, his catchphrases echoing across living rooms nationwide. But fame never made Foxx soft. Behind the scenes, he was just as bold as he was on stage. Foxx demanded respect in an industry that had rarely given it to performers who looked like him. He fought for equal pay, pushing NBC to compensate him on par with white stars who were making more for doing less. He clashed with executives over creative control, refusing to be boxed in or watered down for white audiences. Sometimes these battles turned ugly. Foxx walked off the show multiple times in protest, but they weren't just ego trips. They were fighting for fairness, and they set the stage for future black actors, writers, and comedians to stand their ground. His willingness to speak up about labor disputes and racial inequality didn't always make him popular with the suits, but it earned him deep respect among fellow entertainers and civil rights advocates. Foxx wasn't afraid to call out injustice, even when it meant risking his career. When Sanford and Son ended in 1977, it left behind a seismic legacy. The show had proven that audiences would not only accept but embrace black-centered narratives. It opened doors for series like Good Times the Jeffersons and eventually The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, shows that owed their very existence to the trail Foxx had blazed. Still, Foxx wasn't done. He continued to pursue his passion for performing. He launched the Redd Foxx Comedy Hour in the late 70s, a blend of sketch stand-up and guest stars. He later returned to sitcom life with the royal family in the early 90s, co-starring Della Reese. The show was seen as a comeback, another chapter for a man who never stopped hustling. And through it all, he kept returning to the stage. Stand-up was his first love, and it never left him. Even when the bright lights dimmed, Redd Foxx could still bring down a room with nothing but a mic, a grin, and a story. More than just a performer, he became a mentor. He gave Richard Pryor one of his earliest shots at the comedy game, offering advice and encouragement that would shape the most fearless voice of the next generation. Eddie Murphy later paid homage to Foxx, casting him in the 1989 comedy Harlem Nights and calling him a founding father of modern black comedy. His influence is unmistakable in everyone from Chris Rock to Dave Chappelle, comedians who push boundaries, speak truths, and use humor as a weapon against injustice. Redd Foxx never chased respectability. He chased the truth, no matter how messy, vulgar, or uncomfortable it was. And in doing so, he changed not just what we laugh at, but why we laugh. Redd Foxx and Nancy Kulp. A quiet bond behind the laughter. It was the kind of revelation no one saw coming, not from a man like Redd Foxx. He wasn't known for sentimentality or nostalgia. He was known for cutting deep with his comedy, for exposing uncomfortable truths with a laugh and a wink. But in an interview taped just a few years before his death, he gave fans a glimpse into a chapter of his life that had remained largely hidden: his unlikely friendship with Nancy Kulp, the actress best known as the bookish and refined Miss Jane Hathaway from the Beverly Hillbillies. Sitting back in a leather chair, cigar in hand, Foxx chuckled as he recalled the early days. "People used to ask me all the time, 'What was going on with you and Miss Hathaway?' I'd tell them, 'Nothing but good talk and strong coffee.'" His voice, raspy and warm, dropped slightly. Nancy was one of the real ones. He first met her in the late 1950s, long before either of them had become household names. The scene wasn't glamorous, a nondescript diner on a quiet Hollywood boulevard, the kind of place open past midnight where the walls were yellowed from years of cigarette smoke and the jukebox never quite worked. The regulars were a motley crew, washed-up vaudevillians, night-shift stuntmen, writers nursing burnt coffee and broken dreams. Nancy Kulp was one of them. Tall, dry-witted, and politically sharp, she sat at the counter thumbing through a paperback copy of Camus with one hand and stirring her tea with the other. Redd noticed her from across the room. She looked like she belonged in a library, not Hollywood, he'd later joke, but you could tell she'd seen some stuff. He was still grinding on the Chitlin circuit back then, playing clubs in South Central, sleeping on couches, living on cigarettes and adrenaline. She was bouncing between odd character roles and voiceover gigs too quirky, too intellectual, too different for most casting agents to figure out. They bonded that night over what Redd called the ridiculous audition stories, the fake smiles, and all the ways Hollywood tried to make you smaller. What started as a one-night conversation turned into years of impromptu meetups notes exchanged between sound stages and long late-night phone calls when the industry felt especially cruel. She was sharp, Foxx said. Could take down a fool with one sentence and never raise her voice. And she never pretended. In this business, that's rare. Though their public personas couldn't have been more different. Foxx with his raucous rule-breaking persona. Kulp, with her tightly buttoned intellectual charm, their friendship thrived in the margins. They both knew what it was like to be typecast, to be underestimated, to be told in so many words you don't belong. In that now legendary interview, Foxx dismissed the tabloid whispers with a wave of his hand. Nancy, romantic. Nah, man. She was too classy for a rascal like me. She used to say I was her favorite troublemaker. He laughed. We weren't lovers. We were something better. We were survivors. He admired her political outspokenness. She would later run for Congress as a Democrat in Pennsylvania, something Foxx privately supported. And she respected his battle for equal pay and representation in a system designed to keep black entertainers at the margins. Their friendship wasn't performative. It wasn't for the cameras. It was, as Foxx put it, built, in the shadows away from the spotlight and strong because of it. He remembered how she once came to see him perform at a small, smoky comedy club in Los Angeles. She was the only white woman in the place, he said, grinning. Sat right in the front row, laughing harder than anyone else. After the show, she came backstage and told me, "Your comedy is a protest wrapped in profanity. Keep going." By the end of the interview, Foxx looked off-camera quiet for a moment. A lot of people come and go in this town. Nancy. She was never loud about it, but she stood tall. She walked her truth. Two misfits, two outsiders. As Redd Foxx lit his cigar and leaned into the soft crackle of the microphone during what would become one of his most memorable interviews, no one expected the conversation to shift the way it did. Here was the sharp-tongued king of stand-up, the junk-dealing patriarch of Sanford & Son, known for firecracker punchlines and a disdain for pretense about to wax poetic over Nancy Kulp of all people. Yes, that Nancy Kulp, the prim, polished actress immortalized as Miss Jane Hathaway from the Beverly Hillbillies, a woman whose characters were usually buttoned up, measured, and full of decorum. But Redd's eyes softened when her name came up. She was like a southern lady with a brain sharper than a switchblade, he said, tapping ash into a tray. Didn't matter that she played stiff on TV. Off camera, she was looser than me at a jazz club. Their friendship had always been a whisper in the background of Hollywood chatter. Nothing scandalous, nothing headline-worthy, just something curious. To some, it didn't make sense. What did a bawdy black comedian and a reserved white character actress even talk about? But for Redd, the answer was simple. Everything that mattered. He'd met Nancy Kulp at a late-night spot on Melrose sometime in the late 50s. He was still grinding in the underground comedy scene, trading laughs for rent, and she was bouncing between unglamorous character roles, neither quite in nor out of the industry, just orbiting the margins of fame. She'd sit there with her tea and a book no one had heard of, Redd said. We'd end up talking about politics, movies, Baldwin Eisenhower, anything. And man, she had a mind on her. Foxx quickly came to rely on those conversations, especially as his own career began to shift from gritty nightclubs to the spotlight of network television. The world of sanitized sitcoms and power-wielding executives was foreign to him. It was a place where censors held red pens like scalpels ready to cut away the very edge that made him who he was. That's when Nancy's advice became something of a compass. She'd say, "Redd, just tell the truth, but tell it with a smile." He paused, smiling at the memory, and that always stuck with me. As Sanford and Son was gearing up in 1972, controversy brewed behind the scenes. There were whispers among the network brass was Fox too rough around the edges. Was the show too black, too bold, too real for Middle America? And that's when Nancy quietly stepped in. Unbeknownst to Fox, at the time she wrote a letter, a graceful, articulate appeal to a senior NBC executive. In it, she praised Fox's brilliance and the necessity of his voice on television. She didn't try to smooth his rough edges. Instead, she argued that those edges were the point. "He makes us laugh," she wrote, "but more importantly, he makes us look." Fox found out years later purely by accident. She never told me she did that he said visibly moved. No spotlight, no fanfare, just grace. It was a defining moment for him, not just because someone in the system had his back, but because it came from someone most people wouldn't have expected. "I'll tell you something," he said, his voice catching slightly. "I modeled Fred Sanford after a bunch of folks I knew, my uncle, a couple of old-timers from St. Louis. But there were little pieces of Nancy in there, too. That sharp tongue, that quiet pride, that I see through your nonsense attitude." Their friendship was never performative. They didn't attend galas arm in arm or pose for cameras. They didn't need to. It was built in the spaces between spotlight and shadow backstage over late-night calls and handwritten notes passed between dressing rooms. "She got me," Fox said simply. "That's rare in this business. In a town where friendships were often transactional and fleeting, theirs endured because it wasn't built on fame. It was built on mutual respect, on truth-telling, on the quiet recognition that two people, however different they appeared on paper, could understand each other at a soul level." Nancy Kulp passed away in 1991, but Fox never forgot what she gave him. Not just the support, but the permission to be himself in a world that kept trying to reshape him. "She had my back before anyone with a suit did," he said, tipping his hat in the interview's final moments. That means more than all the awards in the world. And in that moment, with no punchline and no act, Redd Foxx reminded the world that even the sharpest voices need someone who listens, someone who believes. Sometimes comedy changes culture, but sometimes it's friendship that changes the comedian. Marriage and relationships. Aside from his public character, Redd Foxx maintained a personal life that was just as colorful and complicated as his public one. He was noted for his sharp wit and revolutionary comedy. He was married 4 times throughout the course of his lifetime, and each marriage represented a new chapter in his journey. These chapters ranged from the hope of his youth to the profound, passionate attachment, the agonizing betrayal, and eventually the restorative companionship that he found in his 4th marriage. During the early stages of his career, while Fox was still working hard in clubs and attempting to establish himself as a professional artist, he tied the knot for the first time with Evelyn Killebrew in 1948. This union occurred during the early days of his career. Despite the fact that there is very little information available on their courting or the intricacies of their relationship, the marriage was dissolved in 1951, barely 3 years after it had begun. This brief and early marriage most likely occurred during the years of instability and ambition that Fox was experiencing. During those years, the demands of the road and the financial obligations of show business made it impossible for Fox to maintain a family life. Fox's 2nd marriage, on the other hand, was far more significant in terms of both his personal and professional life. On July 5, 1956, he tied the knot with Betty Jean Harris, a gorgeous and accomplished showgirl and dancer who was well known in the entertainment industry for her elegance and charisma. It is interesting to note that Betty worked with LaWanda Page, the actress who would go on to become famous for her role as Aunt Esther Fox's adversary on Sanford and Son, someone who had a Bible. It is an indication of how tightly connected and linked the black entertainment circuit was during that time period that Fox and Harris met when they were performing at the same nightclub. They were both on the same bill. Their love for one another grew rapidly, and they tied the knot not long after they first met. A significant factor that contributed to the notoriety of this marriage was the fact that Betty Jean willingly gave up her own profession. In accordance with the terms of their mutual agreement, she made the decision to completely withdraw from the entertainment industry and instead devote herself to the role of a full-time housewife and business partner. This wasn't only a personal sacrifice, it was also a strategic cooperation among individuals. Betty went on to become the CEO of Redd Foxx Enterprises and managed a significant portion of his business empire. Among these responsibilities was the management of record stores that Fox owned in Los Angeles. This was a business operation that served to augment his income and maintain the strength of his brand outside of the realm of television. Additionally, she assumed a mother role for Fox's family when he adopted her daughter Debrasa, who was born from a prior relationship. Following the adoption of the surname Fox, Debrasa was, according to several reports, treated as if she were his own daughter, at least for a period of time. It is unfortunate that after over 20 years of marriage, their partnership started to disintegrate as a result of Fox's infidelity. 1974 was the year that their relationship began to deteriorate, which ultimately resulted in a sour and widely publicized breakup. In May of that year, Fox filed for divorce, citing incompatibility as the reason. This was a nebulous word that managed to conceal the emotional turmoil that was occurring beneath the surface. In the course of legal proceedings, a deeper degree of mistrust and hostility was uncovered. Fox was successful in obtaining a restraining order which ordered Harris to refrain from removing or hiding any goods from their Las Vegas residence. Harris was ordered to repay $110,000 that had allegedly been stolen from their shared bank accounts as a result of the severe quarrel that arose over the assets. The emotional wounds were so obvious that Fox even skipped Debrasa's wedding in 1975, a decision that showed continuing bitterness or unresolved anguish. The emotional scars were so obvious that they were physically visible. Fox took the plunge into marriage for the third time, this time with Joy Yun-Chi Chung, whom he wed on December 31, 1976, in a spectacular ceremony held at the Thunderbird Hotel in Las Vegas. He was not discouraged by the previous times he had experienced heartache. Approximately 20 years younger than Fox, Joy was originally from South Korea and had a South Korean cultural background. During the time when she was working as a cocktail server at the Las Vegas Hilton, she had only recently arrived in the United States and had her first acquaintance with Fox. The romance progressed rapidly, culminating in a wedding that was celebrated under the spotlight on New Year's Eve. It was a marriage that was riddled with turmoil despite the fact that it took place in a spectacular venue and on a celebratory occasion. Fox initiated the divorce process in October of 1979. Joy launched a countersuit alleging cruelty, which was a strong accusation that hinted at considerable turmoil behind closed doors. She never wanted to be outdone, so she filed the lawsuit. During the time when this marriage was falling apart, Fox gave an interview to Jet magazine in which he appeared to be disillusioned. He announced, "I've been married 3 times and I'm out," expressing his willingness to completely give up on the institution of a marriage on its own. He continued by saying that the money he was spending on divorce settlements would have been better spent on children. He bemoaned the fact that in his view it should go to the children and not some guy. This was most likely a reference to alimony being paid to former spouses who may have remarried. In 1981, the divorce was formalized and it came with a significant financial expense associated with it. A settlement of $300,000 was reached between Fox and the plaintiff, which is another blow to his already poor financial situation. Fox's heart had one more chapter to write, despite the fact that he had sworn he would never marry again. His 4th and last marriage took place in July 1991, when he wed Kaho Cho, a woman from Seoul, South Korea. This was his 4th and best marriage. At Cho's place of employment, Bally's Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas, the 2 individuals had already met. This partnership was founded on mutual support and loyalty, particularly during one of the most difficult periods of Fox's life, which was his struggles with the Internal Revenue Service, IRS, which had nearly caused him to go bankrupt. In contrast to his prior relationships, which frequently began in the spotlight and ended under public scrutiny, this union was founded on these qualities. Throughout the whole process, Cho consistently stood at his side, offering both emotional and practical support. Through an interview with Redd Foxx, provided an explanation as to why he made the unexpected choice to marry once more in spite of the disappointments he had experienced in the past. "It is my goal that she will have the opportunity to see me with $1. She saw me with a nickel. Let me give her 75 cents of it." The words he used perfectly encapsulated the combination of humor, humility, and hope that characterized his relationship in his last years. They celebrated their wedding by holding a reception at the Hacienda Hotel, following the ceremony which took place at the Little Church of the West in Las Vegas, which is a location that is well known for hosting celebrity weddings. As a result of this final marriage, which would last until Fox's unexpected death in 1991, Keiho Cho would be the lady who would be at his side during his dying days. Final project. On the afternoon of October 11, 1991, Redd Foxx was on the set of his then-new comedy The Royal Family, which was intended to signal his triumphant comeback to television. The sitcom, produced in part by Eddie Murphy, was created to highlight Fox's distinct combination of sharp wit and physical humor, while starring him alongside another TV veteran, Della Reese, in a multi-generational family scenario. However, what was supposed to be Fox's creative revival ended up being his final endeavor. That day, the cast and crew were taking a break from rehearsals, and Foxx, ever the charming personality, was speaking with an Entertainment Tonight reporter. According to Della Reese, who was there at the event, the scenario that was meant to be rehearsed next was not even complete. Nonetheless, a producer who Reese subsequently said had argued with Foxx on several occasions approached and abruptly halted the conversation. This producer had previously clashed with Foxx, even saying that he could teach Foxx how to be funny, a comment that many who knew Redd found ludicrous if not offensive given Fox's famed comic instincts and decades-long influence on American humor. Unexpected death. Despite his annoyance, Foxx was escorted back to the set, even though his sole involvement in the forthcoming scene was to stroll across the stage behind a chair. He had no lines to deliver. Foxx, visibly displeased and maybe emotionally troubled by the escalating tension, played his modest role in the scenario. But just as he concluded the action, he fell on the set. Initially, there was little sense of urgency among those watching. In reality, many people laughed or watched quietly, believing Foxx was up to one of his stunts. This was, after all, the guy who had for years entertained viewers as Fred Sanford on Sanford and Son, clutching his chest and shouting out, "This is the big one, Elizabeth," in dramatic, hilarious, faux heart attacks. His command of physical humor and well-timed pratfalls was so convincing that even his own co-workers were duped in that key moment. However, Della Reese instantly sensed that something was seriously wrong. Foxx did not get up. As she went to his side, the laughter left her face. Kneeling down, she listened intently and heard him say, "Get my wife," a terribly human appeal that he repeated again. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, Reese immediately asked for emergency medical aid. The severity of the situation began to settle over the set, and a sense of incredulity permeated the atmosphere. Joshua Rich, an Entertainment Weekly journalist, later recalled the event with frightening irony. It was such an absurd ending that castmates assumed Foxx, whose 1970s TV character frequently faked coronaries, was joking as he grabbed a chair and collapsed on the floor. The statement nailed the bizarre agony of losing a man whose comic brilliance had revolved for so long around pretending to die of a heart attack, only to be replaced by a genuine one on stage. Paramedics took Foxx to Queen of Angels Hollywood Presbyterian Medical Center, where physicians attempted to save his life. He was momentarily revived, but his condition was serious. Despite the best efforts of medical personnel, Redd Foxx was declared dead 4.5 hours later, a tragedy that rocked the entertainment industry and astonished admirers all over the world. He was 68 years old. His death signaled not just the end of an extraordinary life, but also the silencing of one of comedy's most creative and uncensored voices. Foxx has spent his life pushing racial, social, and humorous limits with genuine honesty and fearlessness. His passing was keenly felt by many artists, notably Eddie Murphy, who revered and collaborated with Fox. Murphy regarded him not just as a mentor but also as one of the funniest people he had ever known, once saying that Redd Foxx was the most naturally amusing person he'd ever met, a man who could make others laugh without even trying. In the days following Fox's death, there was debate over how to appropriately celebrate his legacy. Finally, Eddie Murphy himself stepped in to cover all of the funeral costs and guarantee that his friend had the honorable farewell he deserved. Foxx was put to repose in Palm Memorial Park, also known as Palm Eastern Cemetery, in Las Vegas, Nevada, a city he adored and performed in for many years throughout his stand-up career. His headstone carries his true name, John Elroy Sanford, and commemorates the burial place of a pioneering comic who influenced generations of performers from Richard Pryor to Chris Rock and who remained a cutting, uncompromising presence until his death. What's your favorite memory of Redd Foxx or Nancy Kulp? We'd love to hear it in the comments below. If this story surprised you, don't forget to like the video. And hit subscribe to Maddie channel for more legendary tales from classic Hollywood. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.